Salama family, how y'all doing today? Welcome to another edition of Tail Radio. We have a few guests on, Kara C, Sister Sheila, and maybe some other Patreon members who want to join and have a discussion. So the title of this particular Tail Radio session is Deconstruction of a Nation. You know, the more I look at what's happening on a daily basis, my jaw just drops, right? I'm like, it's sort of hard to say, well, is God doing this? Or is the enemy doing this? Or, what's going on here? And, of course we know because God prophesied that Babylon will fall. So he's the one behind it. But it's real interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a video and I'm going to read an article about a particular situation, and we're going to have a discussion on it. It's interesting. It's interesting. So hold to your hats, family. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is just share this article, and I'm going to share a video about the implications of this, and we're going to discuss it. The Supreme Court, Eastern Oklahoma, is American Indian Territory. The Supreme Court ruled Thursday that a large swath of eastern Oklahoma is actually an Indian reservation belonging to the Muscogee Creek Nation, meaning that hundreds of prosecutions could be tossed because the state does not have jurisdiction there, including in part of Tulsa. The 5-4 decision notes that only federal prosecutors have jurisdiction over American Indians on the reservation, which includes most of Tulsa, the state's second largest city. Justice McNeil Gorsh joined the court's 4 liberal justices in the majority decision in McGirt versus Oklahoma. Jimmy McGirt, an enrolled member of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, had appealed a conviction of sexual assault to the federal court, saying state courts did not hold jurisdiction over him as the crime took place on the land belonging historically to the Muscogee Creek Nation. Indian country is subject to federal law enforcement. The federal government established the reservation in the 1830s with the Creek in exchange for their homeland east of the Mississippi. On the far end of the Trail of Tears was a promise forced to leave their ancestral lands in Georgia and Alabama. The Creek Nation received assurances that their new lands in the West would be secure forever, Justice Gorsh wrote in a majority opinion. Chief Justice John G. Roberts dissented, calling the court's rule based on improbable ground. All right. So we're going to do another share. Let's see. Hey, Sister E, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard.
Hey, what's going on? Shalom, everybody.
All right, so I'm going to share this video and then we can discuss this. The implications of this.
U.S. Supreme Court has ruled against Oklahoma in the Creek Nation case. For Gannett Media and the Oklahoman, I'm Dave Morris. Today was the last day for U.S. Supreme Court opinions this term. 3 cases were left, 2 involving President Trump and his financial records, but the other, whether half of Oklahoma is a Native American reservation. I'm joined by the Oklahoman's Chris Castile. Chris, good afternoon. What did the court rule today?
Well, Dave, this decision, major decision from the court today, very specifically applied to a convicted child rapist, a Native American who was tried and convicted in state court for some very heinous acts against a 4-year-old girl. More broadly, it involved whether the Creek Nation's reservation, the historical reservation that the Creeks were given when they were forcibly relocated to Oklahoma after the 1830s, actually was still in existence, whether it was ever officially dissolved by Congress, by the federal government. And the court ruled today in a narrow decision 5-4 that the Creek Reservation still exists, that it never was officially disestablished by Congress. And so this child rapist, Jim C. McGirt, was improperly tried in state court should have been tried in federal court because his crime was committed within this historical Creek Nation.
A couple of things to unpack there, and you can see the Indian Territory behind me right there that Chris is referring to. You mentioned Jim C. McGirt. Is it too early to say what happens now on that case with him?
His conviction was overturned, as was the conviction of a death row inmate, Patrick Murphy, convicted, I believe, for a murder in 1999, whose case had gone to the court previously, but they deadlocked on it. So actually, hundreds of cases were technically overturned today by this. Any major crime involving a Native American on Indian land, on what was once Indian land, was essentially overturned. If not officially, there will likely be hundreds of inmates that come forward now with new appeals.
That was kind of my next question, if we can dive into that. This case, as you mentioned, concerned the Muskogee Creek Nation, but the bigger picture also applies to the other members of the 5 tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole. What could result as this ruling regarding some of maybe Oklahoma's death sentences?
Well, the ones involving Native Americans that were tried in state court on land that was formerly, or it still is, reservations of the 5 tribes, which is most of eastern Oklahoma, we should say, Indian Territory. That forcible relocation and the Trail of Tears for the Cherokees, that is now most of eastern Oklahoma. So you're talking about, hundreds of cases that involving Native Americans that have been improperly tried in state courts and will now be appealed. Some of them will be. I mean, that's one of the questions now. How many of these inmates would be qualified for new trials? They're Native Americans whose crimes were committed in eastern Oklahoma. How many will come forward? We'll find out. There's kind of conflicting opinions about that, but I don't know of any other death row inmates. There's been talk of other convicted murderers, but Murphy's the only death row inmate that I know of.
That's a good point. You can read the opinion. Justice Neil Gorsuch delivered the opinion today. You can read that on our website at oklahoman.com. He referenced what you're talking about, Chris, there, that while some may want to appeal, they may be in better shape right where they are right now versus appealing at the federal level. Gorsuch was joined by Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan on this. Dissenting was Chief Justice Roberts, as you noted in your article, Chris, Justices Alito and Kavanaugh. And then Justice Thomas joined in dissent in part and filed another dissent. And we also saw a joint statement from the state and the tribes. They released that saying the nations in the state are committed to ensuring that Jim C. McGirt, Patrick Murphy, and all other offenders face justice for the crimes for which they are accused. We have a shared commitment to maintaining public safety and long-term economic prosperity for the nations in Oklahoma. We will continue our work, confident that we can accomplish more together than any of us could alone. Some analysis, Mr. Castile. Was this opinion expected?
It was. Once, and it's complicated, and I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds on this. Neil Gorsuch, who was the swing vote on this and is a Trump appointee from 2017, he recused himself from the first case, from the Murphy case, which was almost identical to the one. It was identical, in the broader picture to the one that they decided today. The reason is because Murphy, when he was tried in Oklahoma, one of his appeals went to the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in Denver. At the time, Gorsuch was on that court. Now, I don't think he heard the argument about whether the Creek Nation was ever, but he had been on the court when Murphy's appeal had gone through, and so he decided to recuse himself.
All right, family, let's have a discussion on this. And before we start, I just want to make a caveat so those who don't know knows Tail Ministries' position on Native American Indians. Now, Tail Ministries don't believe that Native American Indians are Israel. I know some of you all do. We don't, unless you are of Afro-Indian descent, right? Then you're not Israel. That's our position. You can believe what you want. We don't hold to it. We looked at the evidence. We don't buy it. So now that we had that out of the way, I want to get everybody's opinion on the implications of this particular decision today, because not only does this affect these particular criminals and whether or not they fall under the jurisdiction of the state, but now they're under the jurisdiction of the reservation, the Indian reservation. But a majority of that part of East Texas, I mean, not East Texas, my bad, Eastern Oklahoma, falls under the jurisdiction now of the reservation. So you got about 1.8 million people who fall under that jurisdiction who are not or may not be members of the tribe. So if they're not members of the tribe, then now they fall under the jurisdiction and laws of the reservation based upon this, because according to this decision, right, is this particular territory has this reservation, let's say, has jurisdiction over laws and property and minerals and all these types of things. Right now, I'm of the opinion that we're seeing the deconstruction of America. I'm like, okay, with this decision, a lot of people got to decide whether or not they want to live under the rules of the creeks, or they want to leave, or they're going to pay some kind of fee, or we don't know where this is going to go. But it seems to me, once again, with all the let me check it, because I don't want to get blocked. With all of the chaos happening in America right now, now you add to this the decision that a good chunk of Eastern Oklahoma is now under Creek Indian Authority. Any comments?
Shalom, Salama, Siemi. This is Karis. So I used to live in Kansas City for about almost 10 years. And so when I was living in that area, they would always say that the reason that you would get the term hick was because like Eastern Kansas up to Nebraska down to parts of Texas were all considered Indian territory. And so that Indian territory was always established. It was just never recognized because, again, that was part of the treaties that were just never recognized. So if we're actually stating that there's jurisdiction there, there's also the implication under law that that land is still now technically owned by the Native Americans. And that is a very big thoroughfare in terms of transportation. So that's going to be your infrastructure. That's an economic artery. And so could that go to show that the Native Americans could tax and toll all the cars going through? Does that mean that the property that's there, could they put like an excise tax on that to ensure that they're getting money from homes and things of that nature? So there's a lot of, I would say that there's a lot of economic interest at play. But then again, this also goes to kind of show that, listen, in our captivity, we don't get those provisions because this is our captivity. It was never a captivity for them. So rulings like this, they've always had many different rulings. They've always had many different recompense or different variations of recompense that was given to them. So with this one right now, I think in terms of what we're seeing throughout the nation, I think that this is a very big deal because there's much more that's underneath the surface that is going to cause major shakeups. And we're not just talking about earthquakes from fracking.
So I guess the question would be this: who do you pay taxes to? Okay, so do they pay taxes to the state now? What about all the infrastructure that the state built that no longer belongs to the state because now it's on reservation property? Do they tear it up? Do they pay for it? Do the people make use of it? I mean, what's going to happen? do they have to go to court to decide who all of these structures belong to now? I mean, to me, if they built it illegally without the approval of the chiefs of the Creek Reservation, then it seems to me the state has to pay them or something like that, right? Or somebody gonna have to pay for the use of it. I don't get it. It to me, this decision causes a lot of problems. Now, for me, I'm for it, be honest with you, because it had to happen, because we know the history of America. We know the history of them breaking every treaty that they made, and now they're being held to a treaty that they broke. Now, what happens to the other Indian or Native Americans when they come back and say, you know what, America broke a treaty with us, right? What does that mean for the rest of the country? Like you were saying, Texas, and other parts of the nation. What does it mean for that? Any comments, Sister E?
I was just about to comment because that's the biggest thing. Can y'all hear me? Because I'm actually in my car. Am I good? Okay, so
yeah, I hear
that
you
was
good.
the biggest question about the other Native American tribes that will see this and go with it and say, wait a minute, you all broke treaties. So this means that California, Nevada, Oklahoma, all the West is going to get impacted by this. Not to mention, we got other Native American tribes that go into Florida. You're going to have different tribes that are going to see this and run with this. And now, guess what? If they did it for Oklahoma, they're going to have to do it for the other tribes. Also, I was looking at the local government. How are they going to handle it from a governmental standpoint? Because now you're talking about segmenting a part of a state to say this is owned by the tribe itself. So what goes on with their local government? How will that impact the U.S. government? Are they going to separate from the U.S. or are they going to stay with the U.S.? So this is going to begin to become bigger than what they think it is. And I think this is going to be very interesting, because now it wouldn't shock me none if other tribes step up and say, you all broke the treaties. So that's my thought on it.
Any comments, Sister Sheila?
None, except that I agree with the two previous comments. It's going to cause some problems. Other nations are definitely going to stand up and say, hey, what about us? I also think it's going to be a problem. I mean, like, I don't know, if you're going to that state, it's going to be weird. I mean, I guess you're going to be under, I don't know, two different types of laws and rules and regulations. That could be very confusing for people. And I also find it interesting that they would do that. I'm in agreement. It should be done because they dogged out the Indians as well. But it's just amazing to me how everybody else can kind of get their due process. And yes, we are under the curse, but it's just interesting how it seems like others can get their due process. But, what about us? What about Israel?
Yep, exactly. And so, I'm going to show another video because somebody had just shared what about Mount Rushmore, which I agree. And to me, I'm like, well, we'll get into it because I'm just flabbergasted, to be honest with you, that they would even allow this to happen. So let's look at this right quick.
Special advisor to the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe about the protests and President Trump's visit. So Chase Iron Eyes, I know that some of the concerns leading up to the protests were that the president and the administration never asked permission from the tribes to hold the event there, and that the land has been ruled by the Supreme Court as your land rightfully that the United States has stolen. What happened? What do you think was accomplished with the protests?
Well, a lot of times over the past 500 years, indigenous voices have been completely ignored or deliberately brushed under the rug, so that sometimes that's the only way our voice will be heard, is if we offer our bodies and we place our bodies in harm's way, like we did at the Dakota Access Pipeline, like we'll do at the Keystone Access Pipeline. The religious radical right terrorists who support our current great white father, President Donald Trump, were out in full force yesterday. So we had to let the entire world know that when a man of ill character, according to our treaty, a bad man among the whites, whenever he plans to come into our sacred land without so much as a courtesy call, then we know that a man like that lacks the proper civil decorum. He could have called one of our tribal leaders or some of our chiefs and relayed that message, because he knows, because of his own laws, his own court system, and quite frankly, our own court system since 1924. We had American citizenship imposed on us, whether we wanted it or not. So all of the constitutional rights and natural rights that adhere to American sovereigns also adhere to us as American Indians, but we have an ancient a priori sovereign right to say who can and can't pass through our territory, according to the 1851 and 1868 treaties, which are much newer than our United States Constitution, I might add. All of these rights, including our treaty rights and our tribal Indian rights that predate the English language here on this hemisphere, sometimes that's the only way we have to communicate to the world, is to say, look, this means so much to us. Our children's rights to clean water and healthy ecosystems, and having land back in 2020, because the Black Hills, 1.3 million acres, are federal lands.
This is also happening in the context of tension between tribal nations and the state government on measures you're taking to make sure that the coronavirus doesn't spread.
You know what? It's all connected, sir. Not only Trump's visit, but the deliberate visit that Governor Kristi Noem says we are literally not going to social distance. We're not going to concern ourselves with other people's health and well-being. We're going to do the opposite of that. And the health and safety checkpoints that not only the Pine Ridge Reservation, but the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and the Rosewood Sioux Tribe and Lower Brule, it's the Lakota Nation, the Sioux Nation. This is the only way that we're going to be able to hope to survive another Eurasian plague. And a lot of our European brothers and sisters, either they feel extra brave because they've survived so many plagues, but we as indigenous nations have a very direct memory of what we went through with smallpox, cholera, Spanish flu. I mean, it hits us harder because we haven't been exposed to those things for that long.
Yesterday, the president spent quite a deal of time talking about how he wants to preserve statues and monuments and how he wants to enforce those laws. One of the subtexts was that if protesters got their way, Mount Rushmore would be demolished or destroyed in some way.
Yes, sir. That's a very important question that cooler heads need to think about, because some people want to blow it up and some people want to worship it like they're gods. And so somewhere in the middle of that, we need to have a frank truth-telling and a conciliation so we can go forward in this country together. We need to decide, should we add another face? Should we leave it alone? Because if we destroy it, that is also an act of desecration. Even the Crazy Horse Monument, though that is one of our guys, it's still an act of desecration to do something to the natural universe that wasn't designed to be that way. But right now, we need to be deciding who can we celebrate and in what manner can we celebrate them, because all of the prior statues are usually monuments to slavery, genocide, and racism. And if I'm an American European, I can't get away from that. So besides telling only the good things about George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln or Teddy Roosevelt, we also need to tell the truth about these men. And maybe we should consider celebrating and idolizing women at this point.
Chase Iron Eyes, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
So, family, is this the end of America? I'm asking. To me, I'm seeing Babylon deconstructed right before our eyes. I see coronavirus. I see Black Lives Matter protests. I see the Creeks getting their territory back. You know, the Indians are protesting as well. The whole world is in chaos, right? I'm like, I'm not too, you know, as my brother Berean would say, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But it seems to me that America is being deconstructed. Now, whether it's by God or by the powers that be, or God using the powers that be, one thing I know is prophecy being fulfilled. Any comments?
Yeah.
Also, and great point you brought. I think that we got to realize in the Bible that the Most High God is going to bring His people back, but there are going to be outside indigenous people that are going to be still thriving and living, because they're going to have to come yearly for the feast in order to, in order to be prosperous. What nations are going to be coming back to Israel yearly, or coming back to God to, coming back for the feast yearly? It's not going to be Israel. It's going to be those other nations, I believe. So I think He's not going to do away with some of the indigenous people. I think it's a system that when He comes, He's going to destroy. And when He destroys it, guess what? He's going to build His own government. Now, if you don't abide by His government being Christ, you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of it. But I think some nations, I think the Most High God is getting back to the place of taking the nations back to the place that they were before colonization came into play. So that's my thought.
Sister Sheila, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think it is the deconstruction of a nation. I didn't see this one coming, so I'm kind of floored by it too. But yeah, it's the deconstruction. I think it's just the time of the I don't know, the great exposure, if you will, or God is just, I think the Most High is just allowing things to just break up and be torn down, and things that we never thought would happen are happening. It's like, I don't know, the great exposure, the great leveling, if you will, is going on. It's definitely the deconstruction, but I'm still a little concerned about reparations, even though I don't think we're going to get it, because I just still see all of this as they're accommodating everybody else, but they're not accommodating us, and they never will.
I think, just so bringing back to the to what the young man was saying about Rushmore being a national treasure, worshipped by the American Europeans. And it's not that that's the only one that's being worshipped. It's the fact that everything that they have put their faith and trust in, that they're trying to worship, is now being removed from them. So that removal is something that shows that, it's the power that's being extracted. They're showing themselves powerless. And that's not a good thing in their psyche, to where, okay, if I'm starting to lose this power, what else am I going to lose? This is why we have folks that we're starting to see the uncomfortability become an actual, they're striking out. They're striking out because for us, we can internalize things, we can kind of context things when we're going through problems, because we deal with it different. We just know how to deal with things differently. We've had problems since 1619. And we've always been told in 1619, don't let master see. Because why? Because you're going to have something that you don't want to have, because you are humanizing an issue. So for us, we don't really humanize issues the way that they humanize issues. For them, they have to have an aggressive emotion. And so, all these things are still going to be centered around us, because when the going gets tough, it's always us that's been in the forefront of their minds, because we haven't been of quote unquote any use to them since 1865, yada, yada. So right now, I just wanted to actually add this on in before I shut on up. That basically the Emancipation Proclamation, it really didn't free us. All it did was it transferred our ownership to the United States government. So by contrast with what we've seen with these reservations, I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of these prisoners, the folks, our folks in jail, try to have their cases looked at again under the understanding that, hey, we are technically under the jurisdiction of the United States, just like um, our Native American friends. So if we're trying to go back in time and they're trying to actually honor those things, you can't have one without the other. So if I was a criminal justice lawyer, I would be looking at the same thing, because then you would have to have a lot of things renewed. And then on top of that, I would be saying, hey, until everything gets renewed, I need my client to be free because of yada, yada, yada. Yeah, that's just my take.
Siobhan, any comments?
Yeah, I caught the tail end of it, but I think this may be the beginning of a wilderness situation, because if we're going to be having territories around the United States, and I'm sure that's just probably the first one. I don't know if there's going to be more states and more territories where they, decide that they're going to give it back to the Indians. But I feel like that may be a place of refuge or a wilderness situation where we may be able to flee to before we have our second exodus, because it's getting bad out here, with all the cops, and they're trying to start the race war, and they're being caught on the radio saying that they're going to start killing blacks and Mexicans too. So I feel like this may be, well, it's definitely something good and something that the Most High is working out in our favor. I think we just have to stay tuned to see where it goes and where it leads to.
Any comments, Rachel?
Hi, Shalom fam. It's a little challenging to, thank you for letting me come on, Karis, Sister E, Yakoba, hello, Sheila, and I can't see the spelling of your name. Is that Shavon?
Yeah.
Siobhan.
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So it's a little challenging to have this conversation because this is not my kind of ministry or whatever, but I have to speak to it because, and I think the last person who commented spoke to it as well. And that is that, originally what's called the Choctaw people were originally the Chata, if you talk to Chief Warhorse. And all of those lands, Mexico, Oklahoma, all the way up to New York, all the way down to where the Olmecs are, Gulf of Mexico was called Shafunkta, or the Chata people, the Chata nation, which is where funk music came from. And so if you talk to Chief Warhorse, she's over that land, and they're independently over that land. And I have other friends who are from these nations. And of course, the men that you had up on there, they call them the Bering Crossing people. If you talk to these people of the Chata Nation, they will tell you they came here on ships. And these are the African Americans. And I know you don't agree with this argument, but nonetheless, they're there and they're chiefs and they're ruling in these lands. And this is what they say their history is. So for me, I'm not going to tell these people what their history is, because I've had people telling me my history my whole life. But I think the opportunity that this is going to create is that because you have people like Chief Warhorse and another one of the female tribal leaders over the lands in the Gullah lands, it is going to be a place for people to retreat to when everything gets divided up, because it will be a reversal of everything, and they will be independent lands where people can seek for protection. And when you're talking about these other tribes, these are the Bering Crossing people who took over the identity, is what Chief Warhorse will say, that they allowed those people to live in their land among them. And then with the whole $5 Indian thing, they had all of the borders redrawn. They had their identities detached from the land through identity theft and through theft of land. But it's like all of that is now reversing. And so I think it'll just create a ripe situation for unity amongst the nations of Yasharel. And even what's happening, down in Georgia with that, I can't remember what they're called, the NFAC.
NFAC.
Yeah, NFAC. Yeah, they're already taking back that territory. That territory is being prayed over by Hebrew Nation, and already, the Russian government had said a year ago. Remember, they did some kind of they kind of threw it out there, floated it out there. What about if we made that an African nation within the United States? So it seems like there will be some territorial lines drawn and places where Yasharel can go to. And even when you watch these TV series that talk about the splitting of the land, oh my gosh, I can't remember what the name of the one is. I actually used to work on it. But there is talk in this predictive programming of there being a separate nation set up for the African nations in America, like in the Babylon, which Russia and China come in. And so, and I think that the people who remain will be those who Hasatan makes war with once Yasharel returns to their land. But,
I have a question for you, because one of our listeners in the chat, they asked, do you have any proof for your position? I guess what they're saying is, for them being Israel, because, and I'm gonna make this comment, because there's a lot of things they don't fit. One, they're not part of the awakening as a mass group, which was prophesied. Okay. Two, the prophecy state that all of Israel is going to be regathered from all nations. They were scattered as slaves and brought back, and God's not going to leave none behind. And so, there's a whole bunch of things that they're not part of, let alone their DNA don't tie to ours. So,
well, you're talking about the Bering Crossing people, though. You're not. I'm going to put a link to a video that I did in here. People can go and watch it. And like I said, I'm not always studying it, but that's over on my other channel. But it's just, I'm not really here to debate that.
Well, they just wanted evidence for your position. That's all.
So, well, the evidence is there's so many of the Olmec heads that are identical to the people of Yasharel. And yes, their DNA is identical. It is the same DNA. Some people often confuse these straight-haired, Bering Crossing, Mongoloid people, and they say, oh, let's compare their genes. And their genes aren't like our genes. But these are all the kinky-haired Black people who say they are Negro, originally from Africa, and they say they're the 10 tribes. That's what Chief Warhorse will say that. She knows that they originally came from Africa, but they have the 10 tribes beef with those who say they are Yehuda. They say, you're telling us who we are, and we're telling you who we are. We're telling you that we came here before you.
And which tribe is that?
The Chata Nation, the Shafunkta. And the easiest Google anybody can do right now is just Google John Ogilvie and then go pictures. John Ogilvie America and pictures. And all of the people you will see in his books on America are all kinky-haired, dark-skinned Black people.
Can I ask you a question? So just think about this. Do you think that the United States government, if all else fails, do you know how many nuclear silos we have up in the upper Midwest? That's where you get most of your bunkers that's been decommissioned, that a lot of these folks are trying to hide out in. So if you know that we're amongst the land of our enemy, do you think that they will give up this land without a scorched earth policy? Because that's the only thing I can see. is that number one, we do have the man in place. If you hadn't seen his niece Mary's excerpts from her book, you probably need to check it on out, because that's the personality that I believe the Most High has set on up for that unthinkable scenario. Because that's the only thing I can see. Because no great nation would just want to, especially what we're seeing right now. I don't think people want to crumble and cave into a third world nation. And that's what you get when you don't have black people around here. I'm sorry, that's what you get. Because if you go out to any other country that doesn't have that many black folks, let's just say Europe, but Europe, that was built by us under the Marshall Plan. So that was kind of, you can't utilize that. But those places in the Middle East, North Africa, that didn't have a large population of us going in there and actively rebuilding, they're third world for a nation because they don't have working plumbing. They don't have steady electricity, all the things that we do and all the things that we've done. So I don't see, especially at the United States, especially when you have white people that gave up their property, their jewels, okay? They don't want to give up the scepter. And if they give up the scepter, oh, you know that it's just going to be bad news from there. So that's just my comment.
So when we look at what's happening today, right, and we take it together with all of the prophecies, as we see them, not when I say we, I'm talking about those who follow Tail Ministries and see, what we say is going to happen concerning Israel, right? We know that Israel is going to be persecuted in the last days. We see that happening, right? We don't see that happening to who we call Native Americans. We see all these prophecies about the awakening. We see that happening among the Negroes. We don't see that happening on who we call the Native Americans. When we see all of these prophecies coming together, all of the historical sites dealing with Deuteronomy 28, those dealt with the Native Americans. I mean, not the Native Americans, but with the Negroes, all of the prophecies being fulfilled with the Negroes. We have to take the totality of everything. We have to look at the historical evidence, and, which is why, Tail as a whole do not believe Native Americans are us, right? They don't fit none of the prophecies, other than when you try to say they've been persecuted. Even if they had a few traditions, I mean, you can find that across the world of different nations with some of the traditions, like fringes and all these different things. But then when you look deeper, they don't have the other traditions that we have. When they look at the prophecies of the Bering Strait, that whole thing is the reason why they came over here was so they could worship their God, but yet the ones over here don't worship the God of the Bible. It doesn't make sense. And so with the awakening, we have the preparation of a group of people who's preparing to leave, who are ready to leave. Those people are not waking. They're not prepared to leave. They're not ready to leave. So that's just my position on it. Now, I have another question, and that has to do with where we're at prophetically speaking, right? Prophetically speaking, how does this fit in, right? Because what I see happening is, all of the judgments that our enemies, all of the things our enemies have done to us are being judged, right? And not just us, but for all of those who were persecuted without recompense, all of those who were judged without due course, because God says that the prayers of the righteous goes up, right? And he's heard them, and he's going to come and deal with that. And I believe that's Israel and non-Israel, right? That all of the just people who died, right? Their prayers are finally going to be answered. And if that's the case, is it possible that reparations is the next thing coming down the pike? Any comments? Y'all don't have to rush.
Yeah, this is. I'm sorry.
Can I just want to say, one more thing. I'm not really an expert on the 10 tribes. That's not what I talk about all the time on my channel. I think if you really want a discussion with that, you would have to get in touch with somebody like Chief Warhorse or Big Judah and go into the whole debate with him, because he has over 40,000
I
people.
cannot talk to Big Judah at all. That dude,
Oh, really?
That dude, eschatology and his biblical interpretations are just the worst I've ever seen in my life. I'm sorry. I don't say much about the dude, but I'm sorry. I'm like, I don't see how y'all follow him at all. I'm sorry. I just had to say it.
I do not regularly follow Big Judah, but I did know him in the beginning. But what I'm saying is that it's probably a good idea to put aside any differences you have, or even if eschatology, and have him come and explain it to you, because he has over
That's
40.
not gonna happen.
Okay, but regardless, you want to say that there aren't any of these people. And I'm not even wanting to make this argument. I don't even want to discuss this. I'd rather discuss other things like prophecy. But he's got over 40,000 Black people on his channel who say they're Black Native Americans.
I believe that, but
So,
if you look,
so
if you,
you're
hold on one second, because you say they're Black Native Americans. Yes, they are. But if you look at the written historical documentation about how they became Native Americans, is because the alignment that the slaves had when they came here, when they were running away from the slaves, some of them joined the Cherokee and became the Seminoles. Then you got some of those who were enslaved to the Native Americans, right? And so this is the reason I have a big problem with Big Judah, because they try to make it look like, because they took a picture of some Black Indians, that is Israel, when in essence, the only reason you got Black folks living amongst those tribes is because either they were their slaves or they ran there and they fought against the white man like they did with the Seminoles. That's history, which is why I can't stand Big Judah, because he's a straight up liar.
Okay, that's fine, but you can always talk to somebody like Chief Warhorse also. I'm not going to make the debate. I'm just going to say it's probably a good idea to reach out. And this is why I'm going to say it, because those people do have those lands. And if what they know to be true about their own history, and they've got a lot more valid stuff, that I just don't want to go. I don't want to debate about that here, because that's not what I'm here for. I just thought I would weigh in on the commentary, but I think that will become potentially a ground where people will have to come to terms on in order to find a safe place of haven. People will have to sit down and listen to each other's history.
I personally don't have a problem interviewing her, but I will never interview Big Judah. I've never seen a bigger liar in my life, right? I have no respect for the man. Okay, none, zero. I don't say that about many people. Even some of the camps I disagree with, right? But that dude, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I understand. I fell out with him over a lot of doctrinal stuff, but nonetheless, because I can be so hardline with a lot of people, I'm just trying to have more unity now, because things are going kind of crazy. And so,
Rachel, I respect that, and I don't mind you giving your viewpoint. It's just that, if you tell me Big Judah, that's a trigger word for me, right? And so I don't mind having that discussion, even with whoever you recommended. That would be fine, because I'd like to see her viewpoint, right? I'd like to have that discussion with her and show her why I might disagree with her. But I do have a problem when it comes to the fact that you have Black Indians, because when you look at the historical evidence of how they became part of the tribes here in America, it's all because of slavery, right? So, but I'm willing to have that discussion. If you could, send me her contact information, I'd be willing to reach out to her and see what she has to say.
Yeah, I've never spoken to her myself. I've just researched a lot of her videos and interviews, and I did some videos on my channel. People can go and watch them, or you can go and take a look at them. If I can get a contact from her, because one of my teachers, Prince Yitzrael at NOY, he, I believe, actually knows her. So I think it would be a good idea just even to talk to her, regardless of what the truth ultimately is. It's good to have those relationships, because they have that land. And the federal government has no jurisdiction over it. And so it will be a safe haven.
I agree, because I mean, I'm gonna say that I have no problem with the Native Americans, because they've been persecuted, like we've been persecuted, not as bad, but they've been persecuted too. And we have a lot in common, right? So be honest with you, we all should be allies. Now,
Right.
for me, I think that when we're talking about prophecies and what's happening in the last days and the end times, you can see that those really do affect who we call the Negroes, right? They have the historical,
Oh yeah.
right?
But they're gonna, when you talk about Native Americans, they're gonna say those are the Bering Crossing people. We're not them. We're the first people, and they're gonna be like, yeah, the prophecy does affect us. So anyway, I don't want to
we
say
could have
anymore.
that discussion.
Yeah, I don't want to say anymore because
that
I want to talk to you about other stuff, because there's a lot more common ground that we have in other areas. But I just don't want to be remiss.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have a problem with good evening, brethren. I have a problem. But anyway, let me share this video. We'll talk about
Hey,
it.
I got one thing to
Go
say.
Okay, go ahead.
If I want to get on your nerves now, I'm just gonna say Big Judah.
And I'm gonna say, Sister E, good evening, brethren.
I'm done.
All right, let me share this.
Happening now. Activists are demanding change in downtown St. Louis, but this time their focus is reparations. This afternoon's protest is near the old courthouse downtown. That's where 5 on Your Side's Jasmine Payute is live with the latest. Jasmine.
Okay, this protest started about 10 minutes ago. You can see behind me about 60 people are here. It's being led currently by Missouri State Representative Rasheen Aldridge and Reverend Daryl Gray. Again, today's message, reparations. And by definition, reparations just means helping people who have been wronged. But they say what you may be thinking about the word helping is not what they mean. Reparations. For activists, this 10-letter word takes on a new meaning.
We're not saying just give every black person a check. When we say reparations, it's very clear. We're saying put that money back into our communities.
Wednesday, organizers with Expect Us gathered outside the old courthouse in St. Louis, demanding amends be made, something they've done in the past.
When we say reparations, we're saying freedom for communities that have been underserved, putting money back into communities that have not seen the best of times, to make sure that they can have strong neighborhoods.
Rasheen Aldridge is a Missouri State representative and activist. He says in all, activists have 5 demands: close the workhouse, defund the police department, reparations, disarm or train police officers in de-escalation tactics, and free political prisoners.
In the past, we've done protests and then things have just died out, but we can't give up yet. So we're continuing to push for our 5-point demands.
He says the demands are not a big ask, pointing out flaws with the way city funds are currently spent.
It's crazy how so much money goes to public safety and little goes to mental health, little goes to parks, little goes to community. You're talking over 50% of a budget, over 50% is going to public safety, and we're getting the same result. So we're saying it's time to reallocate, it's time to defund, and it's time to reimagine public safety and policing in our city.
You can hear the crowd chanting behind me. They were just saying defund the police. Leaders say that reallocating funds is not something new. It's something other major cities have already done, and they're hoping St. Louis will do the same. Reporting live in St. Louis City, Jasmine Payute, 5 on Your Side.
All right, so it seems to me that the reparation discussion isn't going to go away. I mean, almost every black channel that I go to now, they're discussing reparations. Now, the question is, how is it going to manifest itself? I'm of the opinion that maybe what's going to happen is that it's gonna manifest itself once, this, I don't want to say it this way, but this race war kicks off, right? Because at this point, the way they're promoting the Black Militia under In Fact, which is Grandmaster Jay and all these things, right? That I don't see how you don't trigger a people who love fighting, right? I mean, so how does that fit in? You know, and I want to get your point on this, Karis, like you was talking to me earlier, because I think reparations coming personally. I don't know in what form, if it's going to be gold, silver, cash, bitcoins, whatever. The Bible tells us is we're leaving with great substance. I don't know what form that is going to come in. What's your thoughts on that, Karis?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say, we need to stop being so timid when we're trying to let people know what the facts are. And the facts are, they owe us money. They owe us a check. And so when they're trying to say all these things about, well, we need community this and community that, have we not learned over the last 400 years that everything that they set on up is just a funnel game back to them? You know, I've been steadily trying to find out through YouTube where that $100 million donation is going to be to help support Black content creators. I would like to have that because I have a couple videos that I'd like to do. But the sad thing is, we already know that the game is just a rigged game. So when we're trying to say, oh, well we need it in our communities, we need that. No, I need it in my hands because guess what? When I have less stress on me, I'm able to think and I'm able to create, just like our forefathers were able to do. And guess how much stuff we had to create under duress? So if we're not under duress and we actually are able to do it under freedom, just think about how much greater we would be able to do things. So getting back to NFAC, watching his Grandmaster Jay's videos, it sounds good if you're militant minded. It sounds very good. And the reason I say that is because, look, everybody's going to be off in error contextually. You know, how he tries to blend in the commit with the Hebrew talk. But at the same time, though, you know what it speaks to? It just speaks to our flesh. Oh man, you know, I'm a registered gun owner, and I got me a semi-automatic. I could sling on up. Prior military, okay. Let me go on out here and march. Let me go on out here and get in formation. Let me go on out here and show people how to properly do tactics, how to properly train to defend ourselves when that time is coming. Because see, it's not like he's lying. He's not lying, but he's taken the sensibilities that we all feel because we're people under oppression. So if you're speaking to the oppression, then yeah, it's a great message. It's a very good message. Because we'll all say, and excuse the fact that, hey, this guy's on it. He's given a good direction and he's not trying to be apologetic about it. And that's what we always say when we definitely look at the media and mainstream media when they're catching these stories. Oh, please, just help us on out. Now, what the man did, he went into a psychological imperative that you had when you saw the original Birth of a Nation in 1913. It was Black people with guns, Black people that are arming themselves, Black people that are marching around freely, displaying high-powered firearms. And that goes to the psyche that, oh man, my power is diminishing because look at what these Black folks are doing. Oh, you know that the retaliation is going to be real. And I think that NAACP warning that came on out, where it's supposedly come on out, it's merit to that because it's a destabilizing factor to where they're seeing that, well, for these last, 150 years since they came off the plantation, they've never done anything like this. And that realization is, well, we fought in all the wars. we've been the deciding factors in these wars. Don't let them tell you that it wasn't one single black man that had killed over 100 German soldiers in World War I with his bare hands. So if that can happen then, what do you think can happen now? And we're just starting to wake up. So if we're calling on an energy source that we hadn't been able to call on for over 400 years, and we are having confidence that we've never had since being here. We've never had this confidence because we were under the condition that, oh, we're just black people and that's it. But now we're under a condition of, no, we're not just black people. We're Israelites. We're in the tribe of Judah. We see 400 years that's coming through. We see the signs in heaven. We see comets that haven't been seen in 6,000 years. We see all these things aligning, all these moons aligning, and then things happen. So if all this stuff is going on, we know that it's not circumstantial anymore. Now there's something substantive behind how we feel. And now that substantive nature is, okay, well, guess what? We were armies of Israel, and that's what we're supposed to be. So maybe this is what the Most High is doing. I don't know. But it's but you know that it is definitely stoking the flames that we're going to see some sort of reverberation or impact. And you know, again, for everybody listening, make sure you have a weapon that's legally owned. Okay, get your concealed carry permit, and just be wise about your understanding, situational awareness. That's
so Jules, what's your opinion or any comments?
Oh no, he's great point. Military also, Navy, by the way. Thank you for your service, Curtis. No, what he's saying is correct. We got to be smart and be led. I agree 100% to be led by the Spirit. I like that foundation on that. You know, because if we go out and try and do things on our own, then you read it throughout the Bible. This is where you fail. We fail is when we try to go ahead of God. So I truly believe we got to be led by the Spirit, and I believe God is gonna handle the situation for us. If He wants us to pick up arms, trust me, He'll let us know. I do believe that.
I agree. Yasef, any comment? You there, Yasef?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm on my way to work right now. My reception's not the greatest, but I'll just be on briefly. I just wanted to make a comment on the reparations subject. As a people, I don't think we'll get reparations ever under the title African American. We need to be recognized as Israel before we get reparations. If you guys look historically, the nations that have received reparations that were wronged by governments or whatnot, it was Indian tribes or Native American tribes. So as far as reparations, I mean, there might be some governmental change as far as the systemic racism goes for African Americans, but as far as reparations, monetary wise or things like that, we need to be recognized as Israel, in my belief.
I can see that. I mean, motivation wise, why would they want to give it to us other than the fact that they believe that they owe God something? Because I don't see anything changing their hearts towards us other than them recognizing we're God's people. So that's a good point. Any other comments on reparations?
Yes, just one thing. I believe I learned this a little over 20 years ago. I was in Christendom. I was studying with a 62-year-old little white lady out of Indiana. Um, she brought to light something that blew my mind at the time. I didn't know, but it actually making sense now. She was like, the rapture, people are looking for that. She said, no, 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 no. She said, first, there has to come restoration to Israel. And she said, it's not the folks over there. And I was like, okay, that's interesting because she said the restoration has to be, I mean, we have to come to the fullness of ourselves that, like they could say, man, these are the people of God. Look how they're prospering. She's like, there's got to be darkness everywhere else. And the focus has to be on these people. They're being led, they're prospering while the world is suffering. And I mean, as far as restoration, she said is going to happen. That's part of it. That reparation thing is part of all of that. But then the people have to be healed. It's like a sequence of events that's gonna be like, whoa, these are the people. Well, that's just my humble opinion on that.
Well, I agree with that 100% because I mean we teach that healing comes as well. So I definitely agree with that.
I wanted to make a quick comment. I was going to say, I don't really believe in coincidences. So it's like this guy, Grandmaster Jay, he just literally popped up out of the blue at the end of the 400-year captivity. And, now I feel like the only thing that the powers that be in the American society really listen to or respond to is violence. I mean, we've tried everything. We've tried to talk to them nicely. We tried to protest. We tried to take them to court. And literally the only thing that they seem to respect is matching energy. So I feel like God is going to use INFAC and the whole Black militia thing to our advantage. I don't know exactly how, but I feel like it's all working together for our good. And at the end of the day, I just want them to run me my check. I don't need any programs. I don't need any of that. I just want my money so I can go.
I'm with you.
Can I say something about NFAC?
Yeah, sure.
I've been kind of looking at them because I don't know why it seems to be I mention it whenever I'm on this channel, but I've worked in the film industry. I'm 53 since I was 12. And, I've seen a lot of stuff shot on set. And, I've also, it's just this week, I've been listening to the Black Nubian Queen Network, which is some of the women who are aligned with them. And that includes Vicki Dillard. And they have some powerful speaking that they do is very truthful and pure, but there's a spirit. It is that spirit that just gets your flesh, into the anger, and then also into the they have this notion that you are, ye are gods, as Hamashiach said. But what I find is that they are very welcoming of all groups, including I think that Master Jay was even talking about the people who are transsexuals, like you come on in as well. But he really sports this Kemet thing. And so does Vicki Dillard. She's always doing the hand thing, the 666 eye hand thing when she's expressing herself. I don't know if she's doing it on purpose or not. There's a lot of really positive and clear stuff that comes out of them. And I still don't know where they stand, but spiritually, though, I'm seeing a lot of the Muslim and the Kemet stuff coming out of them, although they do speak to Yasharel and they speak scripture. But I kind of do see that Yah might use them. And a lot of people are always, when you're talking about, I'm trying to talk to the people, to the Hebrews, they won't listen to me. And a lot of people will be like, well, because some of them are Kemet, because they went into captivity with us. Some of them are Edom. Some of them are Canaanites. and they don't have the same spirit, but they came into the trauma and they have that epigenetic memory of that trauma that they want to respond to. And so that spirit of Kemet or the Muslim faith will have them rise up and want to fight, right? But to be quite honest, when you listen to Master J talk, he's talking about the fact that every state is allowed to have their own groups that set up their own military and protective groups within the states. And there's all these white groups who do it. They just happen to be an all black group. And so they walk and move in formation because it's not illegal, because legally they're allowed to bear arms and to, I don't know exactly what the laws and statutes are around it, but this is why they do all this formation stuff, because they're perfectly inside of the law by doing it. And so, but ultimately, I think that they will be used for Yasharel, that I don't know what's going to happen to them, whether they'll be defeated or not, because he literally went out and said, we're here, KKK, come and get, we're ready for you, come and get us, basically. So it's like, if I was a writer writing this story, because I am a writer, I have been a screenplay writer, I would be like, okay, so Black Lives Matter didn't work that well. Let's bring in this guy to lead this movement. He's got when he wears his clothing, he's got the gecko, the lizard on him, the reptilian thing. He's got the ankh he's wearing around his neck. And they're talking about a lot of the Muslim stuff. It's that spirit of Kemet. It's that Hamitic spirit. It's that spirit of Ishmael and even Edom mixed in with Israel on top of all the slave trauma. And so, but the spirit of Israel is in there as well. And so it's just a matter of, it remains to be seen what will happen. And I don't know if if some of them are paid agents. I have no evidence or information for that. It's just in my spirit. Those are the questions that I posed. But ultimately, we're going to see what Yah does with that situation. But they are all inclusive, and they are more interested in unity. And that is a great draw, I think, for a lot of people.
And, if you look at the movement within the Israelite community, and I'm talking about those who realize they're Israel and those who don't, there's really two big movements, right? There's those who turn into Father Yah, to Yeshua. And then there's those who are turning to either Kemet, ancestral worship, or New Age, like Dr. Mumby. And, to me, I know when Dr. Mumby first started, she seemed like a believer. And now she's talking about stones and jewels and all this stuff. And, I'm like, when it comes to people wanting to return to their roots, I'm like, okay, well, what if your ancestral roots were wrong? Because they never go back far enough to see that, hey, your original people were Israelites. Your original people did follow the God of the Bible. See, I think in their subconscious, they bought the lie that the Bible is the white man's religion, right? I think they bought that, other than that it is our people's history book and our history book and our relationship with our God. So a lot of these people, you got these two diametrically opposed groups within the community. And, now when it comes to Grandmaster Jay, I personally believe he's COINTELPRO. I mean, the guy is too slick, too smooth. And I heard him on Roland Martin, and he sounds like Kara say, what he says is true. To the flesh, it might get you to follow this dude, right? But I too believe that God is going to use them. I believe maybe they fall into that Micah 5:8. And if that's the case, though, that doesn't mean some of them won't die. Because if you carry a sword, then you might be killed with the sword. So, I just think they don't realize that. And it's not a battle. I mean, we could win a battle, but we won't win the war in the flesh. I don't think they understand that. But once again, if you're Kemet, you're not going to understand that. Now, Grandmaster Jay, like I said on Sister E's show, he wears the hat of Kemet and he wears the hat of Israel. You can't be both, right? You can't wear the Ankh and be Israel. You can't have the all-seeing eye and be Israel, And I think a lot of people are being set up for the slaughter. Not saying, though, that, God's will not going to be fulfilled because God already predicted these things were going to happen, and that ethnic group will go against ethnic group. So let's start winding things down. Anybody, if you want to comment on what I just said, that's fine. Or if you have any last comments, let's have them.
I wanted to make a quick comment. I agree with both of y'all because I remember when I first heard about him, I was kind of like, well, he has the all-seeing eye, and he talks about Egypt. But I think a lot of Israel is confused because I know when I first woke up and awakened to the truth, I awakened under Pastor Darby in the camps. And so before that, I kind of was looking into the Kemet stuff too, because like when you first wake up and you realize like everything is a lie, that's kind of one of the first things you may turn to is Egyptology or things like that. So I think everyone is in different stages of the awakening. Over time, I realized that, that's not the way. Yeshua is the way. Egyptology is not the way. But I think we may have to leave space and grace for a lot of these people to come fully into the truth because I think they mean well. And I'm not saying he may be COINTELPRO. I don't know. But I think a lot of these people, Vicky Diller and all of them, I think they mean well, but it's just a testament to the brainwashing and the number that they've done on us over the centuries. Everyone's confused and lost. So we're all just trying to come into the truth. And I think once we start to unify, we can all just kind of, come together, put our heads together and come to one truth, one people, one foundation. So that's my take.
And it's interesting, about Vicky Diller, she follows Farrakhan, so she's nation. So no wonder she's sort of like in that amorphous area, right? Whether or not she's Israel, Islam, or whatever, right? She don't know what she believes. And be honest with you, if you follow the nation, you don't know what you are. You don't know if you're a Muslim. You don't know what you are. So, I think a lot of people who are Kemet going to be drawn to Fly Nubian Queen. And if you notice, you will hear some of them hint at the idea of being Israel, but they promote a Kemet spirit most of the time. So, Sister E, any comments? Because we're going to be winding down.
Oh, I'm good. I think I dropped out for a second. I'm sorry. But I think everybody made great points when it comes to the reparation. Ultimately, we know that the Most High Yah is moving. He's going to be moving on our behalf. So I'm just waiting. That's the whole thing right now, just being patient and waiting on the hand of Yah to move. So that's all I have to say.
I have a little comment about what you guys are talking about as far as that individual, the guy's name with the eye, the all-seeing eye. What I think is going to happen is, humble opinion on this. Scripture says he's going to, God or Yah, Father Yah is going to pour out his spirit upon all flesh, especially in these latter days. Now, don't get me wrong, there is, a Satan, or you call it Satan, or you call the adversary. There's those spirits in play too. And they sound good to the flesh, it feels good to the flesh, and to the eye it's appealing. And like Teo and Brother Yaakov was saying, Minister Yaakov would say, I believe all the people, Israel, if you're alive at the time, when it's time for the Exodus, rather these people are not believing God, believing in God, I think their hands are going to be forced to move out. And that's where that scripture, I believe, says, then that's when Yeshua is going to deal with us in the desert, all the rebels. Just a point. I don't know. Food for thought.
Any final comments, Sister Sheila?
Yeah.
Any final comments, Sister Sheila?
Sorry. Yeah, two things. I do think we're going to get reparations. I do think, it's going to be some type of, hopefully, I think it's going to be financial because, like you said, the Bible does say we come out with great substance, wealth. So it's going to be some type of reparations, and they are definitely going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to address that issue and address it seriously. Secondly, I would just say that, when it comes to all of these other people, in fact, and all that stuff. I'm just, not to brag. I just really think it's just so important. It's good that to come to the awakening, I think, and if you already had some type of relationship with the Most High through a son, because then you will not be so, I guess, coerced or just so given to all this other stuff. It's really important that we know that we keep the foundation of who we are, and our belief in God through Christ, and really to be filled with His Spirit so that He can lead us into all truth and let us know what's up and what's right and what's not. And so, I really pray that people just really, for those who, even if they're for the people, they need to be saved. They need to know Christ and hopefully be filled with His Spirit so that they won't be so easily swayed by every wind of doctrine and so easily twisted and on the wrong path. I think that's what's wrong. A lot of these people, and I think we've talked about it before, they came to the awakening, but they weren't saved. They had no previous relationship, and that's going to be imperative. Very, very important. So that's what I want to say.
Rachel, any final comments?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just said some of the things that I was thinking, that I do have this picture of the rebels in the desert. I completely agree with that these people may become part of that, willingly or unwillingly. They may just find themselves there, even though they're part of some other agenda, because Yah is sovereign and His plan, I think, is going to override a lot of things. And I did find it interesting, though, that they've done this confrontation in the 5th month, which was the month of the destruction of the temple, will be next month. So Tish B'Av will be next month. And so, and it's before the official 400 years, according to the Gregorian calendar, is over. So it's before you cross that line. They want to push this racial situation. So I find that very interesting strategy-wise. But anyway, thanks for having me on here, Minister Yacoba. Thanks for your passionate spirit and your humility having me on here.
It's fine.
I really enjoy it.
Because I'm glad to have you on, because it's good to have people with opposing views. Right now, I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna push you now. Everybody know that. You know that, Rachel.
Of course. You have to. I have so many great male teachers, and this is just the way it is. I'm learning and learning and learning and learning from them. And then when we meet, we have these debates. I don't know why it goes that way, but that's just the way it goes. But I really appreciate you.
Yeah, to me, I think that's how we learn, right? We can debate stuff. I'm all for debating. Some people don't like to debate, but I like to debate because you can show me where my understanding might be weak and vice versa. Now, the thing is about me, I'm a little strong-willed, so somebody might think I'm a bit pushy, but I'm just that way, right?
Yeah, I am too. So I have to be very careful with the brothers, because honestly, I have to tell you, I will always have some love for Big Judah, and I think I pushed him into that whole "this is the land" thing. He was already going there, but I think I pushed him over into it because I can be pretty passionate. So
it's your fault.
Female, no, totally, because I'm not that strong, right? But as a female, I have to be careful with the men, because when I get really forceful, you're like that, so I understand it completely. I have no issues with you getting really passionate, because that's how Yah leads you and gives you all your revelation. But I have to be careful with the men, because especially now the men are pushing up into leadership right now. And it's like, so for me, I'm trying more and more not to debate with the brothers. But if you talk to one of my teachers, Prince Yisrael, he'll just be like, no, she was debating with me last week. So anyway, but thank you. Bless you, Baruch.
All right. Karis, any final comments?
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of get into where Grandmaster Jay is using the chematology along with the Hebrew paradigm. So if we go off of, I called my son from out of Egypt, there's no denying the fact that we were in Egypt. It was just that we were a separate nation in Egypt, the same way that we're a separate nation here in the United States. And if you look at my little picture that I have, it shows that's Giza, and that's the pyramids at Giza. And see, if you've ever been to Egypt or if you've been to Giza, there's nothing there. I can say this because I've been there. If you look at downtown Egypt, that thing looks like someone was playing dominoes with the buildings. Okay, and we're talking like more than 12 stories. So it's not that Egypt is such a grand thing. I think that they just try to hype it up to where all these Kemetic teachings is something new because it's an itching ear philosophy. But when you actually go there and you see, oh man, this isn't as nice as someone had made it on out to be, because they did the Ankh and they did all the other stuff, that these little kids are selling for like 50 cents, and they're thinking that it's another idol. That's where we always get confused at, because yes, you have a little bit of truth and then a whole lot of lies. And in this same time period, we know that we're getting to the end, because we always understand that there's somebody that creeps up at the very end, and they're going to have their doctrines and their philosophies that's kind of like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, but it's not all the way there. And see, the thing is, why would you want to act so prematurely? That's kind of my biggest philosophy. Okay, if we know that we're in our 400 years and we're getting to the end of the 400 years, then all of a sudden we want to start jumping the gun at 400 years. Let's just think about this. Well, if I have a chance to destroy you right now, because guess what? You're still in the time frame where I can destroy you, then guess what? I'm going to try to destroy you. But I got to have somebody that looks like you, talks like you, acts like you. Haven't we seen the same picture before? I mean, we have. So whether or not that he's an agent or not, for me, that's irrelevant. But in terms of what we look at and how we have to respond, we have to realize that this is a spiritual fight, but we're seeing the physical and the natural representations of what's being fought in the spirit. And so as we see these things, yeah, it sounds good. Okay, I may want to march with them. All right, I may want to stand on up. But then I have to realize we're getting out of captivity. And why would I want to do that right now? Okay, maybe if things don't look good after August into September, I may have to reconsider my thinking. But why would I want to do that when you see a whole lot of things going on, and you can always tell that this thing is a spiritual fight? And I mean, it's so spiritual that you understand. It's like the atmosphere is so tense. You can cut things with a knife. And so that is really what we need to understand, that, yeah, we cannot give into our flesh, because it sounds good. It sounds like it makes too much sense in the flesh, but we need to do what? Walk by faith and not by sight. So that's all I have. Good night, fam.
So, family, one of the people in the chat wants to have a Q&A session. Would you all be interested in that? If you would be, putting one in there where you can ask me, Minister Teo, Sister E, and whoever else some questions. Let me know. Okay, I see a bunch of ones.
You sure do. You got a barrage of ones. What time are we doing this? Are we doing this now?
No, not now. This will be in the future, and it'll be a strictly Q&A session, and we'll set it up, and you all can ask us some questions and we'll answer if we can. And make sure you have your questions written down, because sometimes, it's not clear if people don't write it down. So thanks for spending time with us, family. Thank you, panel, for spending this time with us and sharing your thoughts. I say look up, for your redemption draw at nigh. Peace out.